And with that, I already saw that our next speaker and panelist is already online. It's Dr. Christiane Wirrig. She's product manager at Spherity, and she has 50 minutes to dive into really interesting topics. She's talking about large-scale credentialing for the US pharma sector with 60,000 supply chain actors. And I'm really curious to learn more about this case study. So Christiane, if you are with us, it's a pleasure having you here, and we're looking forward to spending the next 50 minutes with you.
Hi, yeah, sorry, I was just trying to get my screen sharing going. Yeah, thanks for inviting me, and everyone, and all the attendees. Thanks for hanging in there. Let's just get into everything. Right. So, quick intro to me, to myself. I'm fairly new to the software world. I was a biomed researcher before, and also did some other interesting things like financial statement audit. So I joined then Spherity about 7 months ago, and I'm responsible in part for the credentialing service we offer in the US scene. So I'm going to give a super quick intro to Spherity. We'll then look into the big regulatory change that that's been happening in the US pharma sector, and also finally how Spherity is navigating that US pharma maze of 60,000 plus supply chain actors. Spherity is a decentralized digital identity solution provider. So we have a few pharmaceutical partners already, and our credentialing service for authorized trading partners is our main project, which is now in production. So it's actually not really a project anymore, it's a grown-up product now. We've also worked on informed consent management for clinical trials, electronic product information, and some other projects. We've also got ties, obviously, to the European SSI scene, and digital identity scene. For example, ID Union we're heavily involved with, also done cool stuff with Merck. So a super interesting little company. And basically at the core, we are a wallet provider, which means we sit in every corner of the trust triangle, because issue holders and verifiers all need credentials to issue, present, and verify credentials. So that's sort of the business side of things, and here's the human side. We all work fully remotely, but every so often we get together, as you can see, not always to work. And yeah, we're hiring. So if you are interested or know someone, then give us a shout. So let's get into the topic. In 2013, the US Congress had enacted the Drug Supply Chain Security Act, in short DSCSA. This act had basically a 10-year maturity phase, so it's going to come into full force next autumn. And the goals of this act are basically to secure the drug supply chain all the way from manufacturer to patients. And this is done by regulating what the supply chain actors do up down to the dispenser level. So dispensers are pharmacies and hospitals. The three main goals are to prevent harmful drugs from entering a supply chain to start with, but should they enter, then there should be a fast detection mechanism in place, and finally a quick response to take them off the market. How does the Act address this? There are 4 key requirements. The authorized trading partner requirement, which I will go into more in this presentation. And then there are the other 3 cornerstones, the product tracing, verification, and serialization. And the industry has been super busy with the serialization requirement for the last few years, which meant that this authorized trading partner requirement that we'll be talking about had been that can that was kicked down the road a bit. And it's now it's only really been addressed in the last 2 years, I would say. Now, what does it all mean? When supply chain actors interact, according to DSCSA, they need to verify each other's authorized trading partner status, the ATP status. And how can this be done efficiently? And that was a big question up until recently, and they've tried using GLN, for example, which is like a number companies get assigned, but they're not always well maintained, so they leave a compliance gap. So it's a real big challenge to actually have a trusted relationship, a trusted communication path between the supply chain actors. And this is where verifiable credentials now come in. So using digital wallets and verifiable credentials, you can actually automate that interaction. So say a pharmacy, imagine like a big retail pharmacy chain, they have a box sitting in a warehouse that came back. You know, it looks fine, it looks like they could sell it again, but they somehow need to verify, can I actually sell this thing again? So what they have to do is ask the manufacturer of this box if this box is legitimate. So they have to send a message to the manufacturer, giving the product code and details and so on. And the manufacturer has to say, yes, this is mine, it's all good. Or they say, I don't know about this product, which would mean that the product then goes from quarantine into the bin, I suppose. So, and this messaging back and forth is what verifiable credentials are supposed to secure, basically. So that the dispenser could prove, yes, I am a legitimate registered dispenser, and the manufacturer also can say, yes, I'm a true manufacturer. This is a theory, and here's a bit how this works with the trust triangle. So you can see at the top the issuer who would create basically these credentials. So they would take all the real life documents, you know, company registrations, trading licenses, and whatever, check them, create these electronic verifiable credentials, put them in the wallet of the supply chain actors so that these can communicate. And the addition to the trust triangle that I in the simplified version showed earlier in this system is the verification routing service. Now, this is a US invention for the supply chain also as a result of the DSCSA. And it's basically a middleman. It's like, you know, the phone operators in the past that would choose how you connect the two callers, you know, when phones were still very physical. That's what the VRS does, basically. When a dispenser comes, you know, here I want to check this box, they basically ping their VRS, their verification routing service, and that service then figures out who the exact manufacturer contact is, send the message over to the manufacturer checks the message, checks the credentials, everything's good, then they ping their own VRS and then send the response message back to the dispenser. And on the other side, then the dispenser can check, okay, the response comes from a legitimate manufacturer. So this is how the trust triangle works here in action. And the solution so the practical solution to this theoretical construct is basically what Spherity has built, and we've called it CARO, credentialing of ATP for regulatory observance. And yeah, it's basically a web application that's, we feel, user-friendly. And I'll speak a bit more as we go along about this. Now, it may be interesting for the audience here, and I think especially for the sort of European ecosystem, to hear how like a German startup got into this huge US supply chain. Because from my initial glimpse at the European scene, a lot of the work here seems to be very sort of academic and research level. But here we're speaking about an actual product. So this is the real need. As I said, the law kicks into action next year, and this needs to run, and people need to pay for it. So we're way beyond POC, pilot, and research. So how did this all come about? Back in December 2019, Spherity had some ties with SAP and in some accelerator programs and so on. And the idea came about that the digital wallet and Verifiable Credentials could solve this problem that SAP had with this DSCSA ATP requirement, Authorized Trading Partner requirement. So on the other side, this chap called Bob Celeste, who runs the Center for Supply Chain Studies, had written about blockchain and DSCSA. And so it was like a bit of a decentralized meeting of the minds. So these two parties basically came together and decided to organize a pilot. And so first a proof of concept in Q1 2020, and then this grew up into a pilot, which involved a few pharma organizations that were roped in through SAP and the Center for Supply Chain Studies. So this happened then from Q1, basically start of 2020 to 2021. The pilot concluded successfully. So basically it said, okay, verifiable credentials can solve the ATP problem. What do we do now? So the answer was, well, we have to keep going. How do we keep going? We have to form some kind of consortium. And that kind of consortium is called the Open Credentialing Initiative, short OCI, which came into being in April 2021. It's got members from all across the US supply chain, not just trading partners, so not just manufacturers, dispensers, and so on, but also you can see, for example, the HDA, so industry bodies, like HDA is a industry body rep for distributors. And yes, and then out of this OCI came a certain loads of discussions and stuff and alignment on conformance criteria and how the products should be like and all these things. Other wallet providers joined, and finally this shaped what Caro has become now. And I'm telling you this story because we need, like, it highlights how important collaboration is, how important networking is, and how you can forge a path. So this is why I also want to speak a bit more about OCI, because Spherity didn't just like walk into the US supply chain and say, look, here's our product. It was like almost a naturally evolving development process, which is beautiful, I think. So OCI is still a very young organization, obviously, trying to organize a bit like a consortium, a bit like a company. So we're still sort of growing up and then figuring out how collaboration really works. But we do have some good structure here with, you see on the very right, the DCCA program. This is basically what we're talking about with this credentialing solution. And we're also starting to work on other ideas like the KYC, KYS, so Know Your Customer Supplier program. And there's open calls as well to engage the industry further to keep that OCI work interesting. And one thing I sort of mentioned on the side, but is super important in this case, are the conformance criteria. So I'm assuming a lot of you will be familiar with standard setting organizations like GS1, and OCI is not trying to be a standard setter as such. What we are doing is we use existing standards to build this product, and underlying this, we decide how they should be used and how everyone who operates within the OCI ecosystem should comply to them. And this is important because everyone within OCI needs to be interoperable. So Spherity as a wallet provider and somebody else, for example, XATP is another wallet provider, we need to be interoperable so that the pharma sector, the companies in the pharma sector have a free choice of which wallet provider to choose. And yes, and then so OCI publishes these conformance criteria openly, so anyone could join. If another wallet provider wants to join, then they just need to make sure they comply with all the criteria, and they're rolling. And also the beauty of having a network like OCI is that you can then start thinking about other use cases. So this ATP problem is the first use case that's going into production, but we're also thinking about other use cases like product recall, tracing, order to cash. So even use cases beyond DSCSA, beyond the initial reason for OCI's being. So that is it. Open for questions.
Thank you very much for your presentation. You're almost on point. I see there are no questions coming from the audience. And as our next speaker is already here, I'd only say thank you to you. It was great learning about what Spherity does and learning about your perspectives. Thanks for sharing your insights. And yeah, thanks for being on our stage.
Thanks for having me. Enjoy the rest of your day.